A little bit about mycoplasma and the finisher, what we've seen. The objective of the study was certainly to look at the lateral transmission possibilities into negative pigs. And we're going to go through the preliminary data, the conclusions, and implications. The idea for this project came from a project that I did a number of years ago looking at PRRS and looking at the incidence of PRRS when we placed negative pigs into pig-dense areas. We saw that it was roughly about 50% of the populations would become infected. And this study's been replicated multiple times and generally somewhere between 45 and 55%. So we knew that PRRS was if we placed negative pigs in pig-dense areas, PRRS was very active in infecting those. But having done a lot of mycoplasma eliminations, we didn't really see that same impact when we look at those herds looking at those pigs downstream. And so that's why we wanted to go look at this and just see what the incidence really is. We know that mycoplasma certainly has an impact and has its greatest impact probably in the finishing area with reduced average daily gain, increased feed efficiency, increased medication cost, and I'll share some numbers here. When we looked at one particular production system where we track the statuses, it's about $3.60 a pig, or about $100 a sow, if you want to look at it that way. And when we look at average daily gain, certainly see differences there where we see the mycoplasma. The green is mycoplasma, our PRRS and mycoplasma negative. The yellow is mycoplasma positive. The red is PRRS and mycoplasma positive. So we categorize those farms into three different categories. And so we can certainly see there's an impact in daily gain, and we do see an increase in feed conversion as well. When we look at the mortality, again, we see a slight increase in mortality and percent marketed pigs. So again, having an impact on the number of pigs and the amount of pounds we put out per square foot. And also having direct cost on the medication costs that we put into the pigs, as well as the feed grade medication costs to control the disease. When we add it all up and put it into the economic model, that's where we come up with the $3.61. Certainly that number's been out there a lot of other places, and you can argue what it really is, but I think it's a pretty good estimate and certainly has a major impact. When we've looked at some of the elimination data and the ability to do that, the cost of doing elimination, it's about a 16-to-1 return on investment. And if you can get the normal survivability on a herd closure plan, it's about 56-to-1 return on investment. So again, the economics say it's a good idea, and that's why I think we see more and more production systems taking a look at doing the mycoplasma elimination. This is a data set. The actual number of sows is right about 200,000 sows that have been through an elimination program, but some of those we've just made mistakes and brought positive Gilts back into those farms, so I dropped those out of the data set because that's not really a failure of the elimination, it's a failure of not having negative Gilts. And so when we look at it when we look at the herd closures, about 84% successful. When we do the medication programs, about 53%. So again, we're generating more of these negative pigs getting out into the production systems. And one of the questions that the production systems are having is how often do these groups get infected in pig-dense areas? Will I be able to recoup that investment you just told me, or that savings that you just told me I'm going to make, or will the groups just break down once they get out into finishing anyway? And then we tried to answer in this study some of those risk factors that might be allowing for this lateral transmission to occur. So again, what we did was we tried to identify these finishing sites in the pig-dense areas. This map over here, each one of those dots is a pig farm, and if it looks like the dots are on top of each other, they are. And so, again, the density, we tried to get the finishing barns into those very pig-dense areas. And I think when we mapped them out, when we did a 10-kilometer circle, we had 120 sites within one site in the study. So I think we achieved our goal of getting pig-dense areas. And so we tested the sow farms to verify their status. These are farms that were either established negative or we had done a previous PRRS elimination. So we were very confident the farms were negative to begin with, but we wanted to go in and establish for the study that they were negative. We went in and serologically tested sows to ensure that they were negative, and we did that as we started the study just to make sure that we were sure the pigs were negative that were going in. We chose sites that were run on an all-in, all-out basis. They were completely empty, washed and disinfected before refilling just to make sure there wasn't contamination from a previous group, so that we'd be clear on that. And we started out doing 50 sites. We decided to do, after the results of the first study, we decided to expand the study and do a second, a different season. We did 2 different seasons, and so we decided to do a second set of 50 sites. And so the first set we did was pigs marketed in the summer, fall time frame. And so those would be pigs born in the winter, spring months. And then the second set we did was winter, spring. So again, pigs born in the summer, fall time frame. So we could look at, is there differences by season, or is there a seasonality effect here at all with the process? So how did we determine the status of these sites? We went into these sites just prior to marketing, and we randomly selected pigs from each airspace on the site. We did 30 samples. We ran them for mycoidex as the initial screen, and if we had we used as a definition, if we had an S to P ratio greater than 1.5, we considered the site to be positive right away. And then if we had S to P ratios, because these were all vaccinated, I should make it clear, these were all vaccinated flows because they were going into pig dense areas. And so if they had an S to P ratio less than 1.5, we were going to do further testing. If we had more than 3 of these samples, we were going to do laryngeal swabs for PCR. And again, we had a questionnaire for the risk factors, and then we were collecting the performance data on the farms. It was just a basic, trying to get some demographics of the production sites to see if we could come up with some of the risk factors for why these herds were getting infected, if they were getting infected. So preliminary results. So we had 50 sites in each season, 100 total sites. We actually had 105 sites, and this is a challenge with field research. Some of those pigs got marketed before we could get back to retest them. So sometimes that marketing goes a lot faster than you think. And so they were dropped from the study because we couldn't go back and verify their status for sure. We had 5 different production systems, so it wasn't all one production system. So we went, and these were located in Minnesota and Iowa. And we did 10 10 sites for each production system. And then we went back to those same production systems in both seasons so that we could have consistency across the 2 testing time frames. So, at the end of the day, we had a total of 6 sites out of the 100 that turned positive. One of them was serologically positive with a fair number and a fairly high number of positives right away. And the others had some low S to P ratios and had some positives, and we went back and actually did the laryngeal swabs and looked for the Mycoplasma antigen. So as you can see, we were 92% in the spring, fall. We were 96% that remained negative in the winter, spring, and a 94% when we take it across the whole year. So a 6% infection rate, which was kind of where we thought that would be, is somewhere between, I was thinking somewhere between 5 and 10%, and so 6% certainly fits in there where we thought it was from some other diagnostic work we'd done and some kind of preliminary stuff we'd looked at before. So again, just being able to document that was certainly good to be done. I put this slide up, I realize very small, don't worry about the details here. But one of the things we learned from this study, because all the pigs were vaccinated and the 5 different production systems all use different vaccination protocols. When we looked at testing vaccinated pigs that were vaccinated with a single dose of the Mycoplasma, at the end of finishing, if those pigs are negative, they test very clean. Essentially, you can see here, if anything was positive, it would have been highlighted in red. So essentially, everything was negative. So again, negative pigs vaccinated at the end of finishing tested negative. You can see a few pink and a few yellow. The yellows being suspect, the pinks being positive. And this particular system was using a 2-dose vaccination program, and so you can see there are differences depending upon what you're using for a vaccine and what you're doing for a vaccination program. And so you kind of need to understand, if you're going to go out and do some of this looking yourself, what your vaccination protocol is, and using the laryngeal swabs as a backup test to confirm whether you really have infection there or if it's just vaccine was very helpful in this study, and I think a tool we can use going forward. So again, when we had more than 3 IDEX positives, less than 1.5, we went in and did the laryngeal swabs. Whether you do the swab or the spoon, we like to do the spoon. Dr. Chris Sievers with our group did some of that early work, and the spoon's just easy to make sure you get a good sample. And really what you're just getting is that mucus, and then we're taking that on to do the PCR testing. And when we looked at the sites that we went in and retested, we retested a total of 17 sites. So we only had, out of the 100, we only had 17 we had to go do additional testing in. And when we look at the total here, we had about 30% of those sites that ended up being positive for the Mycoplasma, and the others just being some background reaction with the vaccine. We did have one site in the first set of samples that was kind of interesting that we looked at, and as we started getting the first results in, we had 5 positives and 3 suspects, so it looked like, oh, this site could be a potential problem. They were all low numbers, less than 1.5, and so we went in and we did 50, on all these sites we did, if we went in to do the laryngeal swabs, we did 50 animals, and so we had 1 come back positive, and so I talked to the lab and said, gee, what's the likelihood of this just being a false positive? Could it be a false positive? And so we said, let's go back and do an additional test. And so we thought there's a possibility it could be a false positive, but when we went back, then we had 8 out of 52 samples. They grabbed 2 extra samples because they found 2 more coughing pigs after they got the 50. And so, again, showing that, yes, indeed, that first sample was correct and it was adequate to pick it up. So we went from a 2% to a 15% number of positives in there. So the other thing that was interesting in this study was as we looked at the unexpected positives and we went in and did the laryngeal swabs, all positive sites were coughing. So the cough is still a good diagnostic index as to whether there's a problem there or not. One of the challenges as we went back, I guess it's good news, bad news. The good news is we didn't have very many positive sites. The bad news is we didn't have very many positive sites, so we couldn't determine risk factors because there just wasn't very many positive sites. The one risk factor that it looks like is the greater density of other pigs located to the farm are very likely. The other risk factor to one of the positive farms that we didn't know going into the study that probably didn't make it clear enough going in, but one particular grower worked for 3 different systems. 2 were myco-negative and 1 was positive, and so it probably makes sense that site went positive. And when we looked at the production numbers, again, these groups appear to have broken late, and so they're different than when we look at the other Mycoplasma numbers where the pigs come through the system positive, so we didn't see as big of an impact on the production as well, because most of them were PCR positive at the end and not very much serology activity, so it's indicating that they were late breaks of the Mycoplasma. So in conclusion, again, negative pigs placed in the pig dense area in the Midwest do get lateral transmission. It does occur. It just doesn't happen very often. It's not a very frequent event. In this particular study, it was 6% of the time. And I'll take those odds any day I get them. And again, it's a much lower rate than what we saw with PRRS, where it's approximately 50% of the sites getting infected. So if you go out and spend the money to make the pigs negative, they're pretty likely to stay negative. And again, most of these breaks were late because we picked them up looking for antigen, not titer, or by antigen, not titers. And so again, you're not getting as much impact on performance because the outbreak was later in the finishing phase. The laryngeal swabs can be used for those unexpected positives, and I think if you're going out there doing some diagnostics as kind of a separate sidebar to the study, it's a good way if you've got some questionable unvaccinated animals, some questionable titers you want to look at. This is a way you can go in and determine if there's if it's real or if it's just the titer of the vaccine. And again, what we saw was the pigs are going to cough if they're really positive. And vaccinated pigs, again, I apologize to the university folks in here. As a pure study, this wasn't a pure study, this was a field study, and so we used vaccinated pigs, and so you could argue that you need to have unvaccinated sentinels, and that'd been a much better sample, but a much harder sample to get, and we were able to do it with the vaccinated pigs. One thing, if you are using vaccine and doing monitoring, you need to understand how the vaccine is used in your system, how it responds on the test. And the old clinical signs for mycoplasma are still a good diagnostic tool. So again, what are the implications from this study, from this work? There's a relatively low lateral transmission rate for mycoplasma, which is good. I think this is going to continue to encourage more producers to evaluate elimination programs, and why so many producers have already taken the step to eliminate mycoplasma. And one of the biggest concerns when we first start talking about an elimination is, will the pigs stay negative in finishing? And now we can say a little bit more with a little bit greater precision that yes, we believe that they will stay negative at a very high rate. And hopefully we've just taken one more hurdle out of the way of eliminating mycoplasma from sow farms and the entire production system. The other implication is if you're having mycoplasma problems in your finisher, it's probably not your neighbors, it's probably you. And so you need to go back and look at your gilt development and make sure that you're not shedding too much mycoplasma. It's not likely that it's the neighbor. So some future work I would like to look at is taking some of this data, now that we have it, and we know what the cost of doing elimination is, put it into some of the economic models, do some sensitivities, and see what the true values are of doing these elimination programs. And again, I'd like to acknowledge Beringer Ingelheim for funding the project and helping support the project, and the technical support from Jana Morgan and Eduardo Fano, and helping to design the project and helping to execute it. Our clients for letting us test the pigs and being patient with us as we do the surveys on the sites and helping collect the samples. The other vets in the practice for helping do the work and recruiting herds for the study, and our office staff for helping get all the samples processed and sent in. So again, I do think that we can have mycoplasma-free production all the way to finishing.